Urza originates from Dominaria, specifically Terracer. Now, Terracer is in the northern hemisphere of Dominaria. It's a large continent right in the middle of the ocean between Civ and Arona. Urza was born on the first day of the first year, and his brother Mishra was born on the last day of that same year. Now, this is no coincidence. The calendar system that is used in Dominaria is actually based off of Urza and Mishra's birth. Year 0 is set as the year that they were both born. Urza and Mishra were born to a noble family of Argive, one of the 3 coastal kingdoms in Terracer. Argive is a country that's famed for its scholars. When Urza and Mishra were very young, their mother died, and then their father went on to remarry another member of the aristocracy. Urza and Mishra's new stepmother didn't really care about them, so in 10 AR, when their father fell very ill, Urza and Mishra were sent away to live with their father's old friend Tokasia. Tokasia was an elderly archaeologist, and Urza and Mishra became her apprentices. On the card Grapeshot Catapult, you see one of Tokasia's inventions that Urza and Mishra used. The card Primal Plasma describes one of the lessons Tokasia gave the boys on raw elemental magic. She taught them the basics of artifice, and through the archaeological excavations of ancient ruins, they learned a lot about the Thran. Now, the Thran Empire was an ancient civilization that ruled Terracer at some unknown point in the past until the Empire's decline about 4,795 years before Urza and Mishra's birth. The Thran are known for creating powerful artifacts and for crafting ornate designs into their creations. The Thran were genius artificers, and some of their designs still baffle artificers in the current Magic the Gathering sets. It's very apparent in raw design that Urza's artifacts are based off of Thran designs. For example, on the card Thran Golem, other than the thorns, Urza's future creation card is almost identical to this golem. You can see it even has the same face. The Thran did not wield magic in the traditional manner. Normally in Magic the Gathering, people use themselves as a conduit for magic. However, the Thran approached it differently. They bottled magic in artifacts called Power Stones. Even a fragment of a Power Stone contains within it not just energy, but space. Vast dimensions trapped in fragile crystal. The ruins of the Thran civilization were the subject of Urza and Mishra's studies. Urza thrived in his studies, and he greatly preferred studying over a hands-on approach. Instead of participating in the diggings, Urza would study the artifacts that the excavations uncovered. Though their ideals were leagues apart, Urza and Mishra's creations had a surprising harmony with one another. Mishra listened well to Tokasia's lessons on clarity of purpose. Unlike his brother, he focused his mind on a single goal. Urza and Mishra spent years at Tokasia's camp, and during this time, they made several important inventions and discoveries. One important invention of theirs during this time was the Ornithopter, a small flying device. On the card Ornithopter, you can see what might have been Urza's first attempt at mechanical life. Regardless of the century, plane, or species, developing artificers never fail to invent the Ornithopter. This is very true. You can find Ornithopters in almost every Magic the Gathering set. The most important discovery that Urza and Mishra made was during their fateful journey to the caves of Koios. The mysterious cave was filled with old Thran artifacts, and it also happened to be the location of a long-sealed planar portal to Phyrexia. A planar portal is essentially a gateway that enables travel through the aether between the planes without having a planeswalker spark. The planar portal in the Caves of Koios connected specifically to Phyrexia, an artificial plane. Phyrexia had an ecosystem that was comprised of metal, death, and tissue, and it had mechanical and biomechanical life. It's a horrible world with an accelerated evolution of artifact creatures. Phyrexia was largely responsible for the downfall of the Thran Empire, and is still to this day one of the greatest enemies in the Magic the Gathering storyline. The symbol that represents Phyrexia is a circle with a vertical bar through it, similar to the Greek letter phi. Urza and Mishra were unaware of the significance of their journey to the Caves of Koios. While exploring the sacred cave of Koios with his brother Mishra and his master Tokasia, Urza fell behind in the Hall of Tagson, where he discovered the Might Stone and the Weak Stone. These two halves of stone were sitting on a pedestal, and as long as they were both placed on that pedestal, the planar portal to Phyrexia would remain closed. Urza took the Might Stone, and Mishra took the Weak Stone. Basically, the Might Stone could make any artifact substantially more powerful, while the Weak Stone could make any artifact substantially weaker. Both brothers desired to possess the other brother's stone, and it began to cause tension between the two of them. After their trip to Koyos, animosity between them continued to rise. Tokasia noticed this, and she attempted to help by asking the brothers to give her the stones. She didn't want them for herself. She was only trying to examine the stones and stop the brothers' bickering. Unfortunately, Urza and Mishra did not trust her. They were afraid that Tokasia would give their stone to the other brother. The tension between the brothers finally reached a tipping point, and each brother tried to use their stone to attack one another. Tokasia stepped right in between them and tried to stop the fight. When she did this, both Urza and Mishra lost concentration, and there was an explosion. Tokasia was killed. There are going to be quite a few explosions caused by Urza that result in the death of others. After this incident, Mishra ran away, and the excavation camp fell apart without Tokasia there. Urza decided to move to Yodia. Yodia was the chief military might of Eastern Terracer. In Yodia, Urza used his mechanical skills to become a clockmaker's apprentice. One day, the ruler of Yodia announced a contest. The strongest man in the kingdom would get to marry his daughter, Kayla bin Krug. In order to prove their strength, the contestants needed to move a gigantic jade statue across a courtyard. Urza didn't care about Kayla bin Krug, but he did want a grand tome that was part of her dowry. Here is where you start to see that research and artifice are always foremost in Urza's mind. Urza, being the creative genius he is, built a makeshift Su-Chi to move the statue. All of the other contestants were only able to move the statue a few inches at best. Urza told the king that he wanted to try and move the statue with the strength of his mind. This interested the king, and he allowed Urza to take the challenge. Urza's machine was a great success. At first, the king was unsure if this counted as winning, but he became convinced after he realized that such a talented artificer would be a valuable ally. The king allowed Urza to marry his daughter in the hopes that Urza would create many more wondrous inventions. So, Urza married Kayla bin Krug. Although in the beginning, you could barely call it a marriage. There was no affection, and Urza pretty much ignored Kayla. On Urza and Kayla's wedding night, Urza left her bed so that he could study the Thran book from her dowry. As a sign of friendship, Urza gave the healers of the city potent amulets. Afterwards, thousands journeyed to Krug in hope of healing, greatly adding to the city's glory. Urza was now the chief artificer, and he had access to a personal workshop and new assistants. When sorely wounded or tired, Urza would often retreat to the workshops of his apprentices. They were greatly amazed at how much better he looked each time he took a sip of water. After Krug was destroyed while most of its defenders were at his side, Urza vowed that none of his allies would ever need to fear for their own defense again, even while laying siege to a city far from their home. Urza took his new position very seriously, and with the help of his assistants, he created ornithopters and Yodian soldiers for the kingdom's army. Urza worked excessively on his attempts to improve his artifacts. Urza said, "It has been my honor to improve on the Thran's original design. Perhaps history will remember me in some small part for my work." One of Urza's assistants was named Tawnos. Tawnos was also a gifted artificer. Tawnos learned quickly from Urza that utter simplicity often led to wondrous yet subtle utility. Tawnos won fame as Urza's greatest assistant. After he created these warriors, Urza ended his apprenticeship, promoting him directly to the rank of master. Tawnos' creations were often inspired by living creatures, and Tawnos liked to use nature's inventions to improve the efficiency of his artifacts. Urza and Tawnos became close friends, and many of his creations would inspire some of Urza's later designs. For example, the Falcon engines in Urza's armor were inspired by Tawnos. Tawnos left a legacy of animal designs in many of Urza's creations. While Urza was gaining power and influence in Yodia, his brother Mishra was also rising to power with the Falahi desert people. The Fulani Empire was a great alliance of several different tribes of desert nomads. They were deeply religious people. Mishra had become a very close advisor to the Fulani ruler. One day, a fight broke out between the Fulani and the Yodians. Urza's Thopters were no match for Mishra's dragon engine, and during the fight, the king of Yodia was killed. Those who believed the city of Krug would never fall to Mishra's forces severely underestimated the might of his war machines. Urza was shocked and extremely guilt-ridden when he had to return to Calebin Krug with the news of her father's death. In addition to being Urza's friend, Tanos was also close friends with Urza's wife, Calebin Krug. If it hadn't been for Tanos' meddling, Urza and Calebin Krug's marriage probably would have ended. But thanks to Tanos, Urza and Calebin Krug's relationship improved, and the two of them became a lot closer after the king's death. They even grew to love each other. The brothers, each essentially in control of a kingdom, led a series of sneak attacks and double crossings on each other. At one point, Mishra lured Urza away from Yodia and then attacked Yodia during the night. Luckily, Tanos was able to save most of Urza's artifact plans using Ornithopters. After this incident, Urza realized that he couldn't hold back just because Mishra was his brother, and their conflict escalated into an all-out war. Urza set up towers along the Argivian border. The nations of Argive, Corlys, and Yodia all wanted to destroy the Fulani, so they allied together. Urza was appointed as Lord Protector of the Realms. Humans and machines working together can be fearsome indeed. Each brother developed wondrous weapons of destruction to fight for their side, and the war spiraled out of control. Before Urza and Mishra came to Argoth, the herders prevented their creatures from stampeding. During the war, they encouraged it. This time period is referred to as the Brothers' War, and fighting lasted for decades. One day, Urza told Tanos, "I am a stormcrow, a bird of ill omen. Disaster follows in my wake, and I don't want to hurt Kayla anymore. I don't want to hurt anyone anymore. Only a fool would be at my side." Calebin Krug had a son named Hardin. However, at one point, Urza had caught Calebin Krug and Mishra together, so he wasn't sure if Harbin was his son or his nephew, even though Calebin Krug vowed that Harbin was Urza's son. Mines became common as cities during the days of the artificers. Both sides of the war were being led by genius artificers, so each side was attempting to build better artifacts. Both sides of the war had vast resources, but artifact construction requires immense resources, so both sides were going through their resources at an alarming rate. Urza attempted to create a dragon engine that was similar to Mishra's, but Urza lost control of it and the dragon engine disappeared. When Urza's war machines became too costly, Tanos' weaponry replaced them. Urza's student and friend Tanos developed a coffin that he hoped to use to trap Mishra indefinitely rather than kill him. One day, at Argoth, a large island off the mainland of Terracer, the brothers met face to face, each leading their own army. A foul metallic stench clogged Urza's senses. It was then he knew his brother was no more. Urza realized that Mishra had been corrupted by Phyrexian influence. Mishra was slowly turning himself from a man into a living machine. When Urza discovered this, he felt he needed to activate the force of the Goguardian Silex. The Goguardian Silex was an ancient artifact that resembled a bowl made of a copper-like material with glyphs on it. The glyphs roughly translate to, "Used to wipe the world clean, to topple empires, to start again." The blast from the Goguardian Silex destroyed both Urza and Mishra's armies. It devastated the landscape for miles around, sank the subcontinent of Argoth, and it altered Dominaria's climate to begin the Ice Age. This blast is what eventually caused the downfall of most of Dominaria's major civilizations. It was arguably one of the most traumatic events in Dominarian history. Unlike previous conflicts, the war between Urza and Mishra made Dominaria itself a casualty of war. And all of this resulted from a quarrel between two brothers, each wanting the other's half of a power stone. Another important thing to result from the Silex blast was that Urza was changed from a mortal into a planeswalker. From here on, Urza was an immensely powerful immortal being who could travel around the multiverse with merely a thought. Thanos had accompanied Urza to Argoth and survived the Goguardian Silex blast by being sealed within his coffin. Years later, Urza found Thanos on the shores of ruined Yodia, and Urza released him. Urza asked Thanos to go back to Kayla and give her a message. By this time, Urza truly loved and cherished Caleb and Krug, and he said that he wanted her not to remember him as he was, but instead that she remember him as he tried to be. Urza was filled with grief that he had just destroyed his brother Mishra, who had been corrupted by the black mana from Phyrexia. Urza realized that the Phyrexians were the ones who had corrupted his brother, and that the Phyrexians were responsible for all those years of war. It was against the Phyrexians that Urza wanted vengeance. This is the start of Urza's lifelong hunt for retribution against Phyrexia and its demonic ruler Yawgmoth. Yawgmoth is one of the most well-known villains in the Magic the Gathering multiverse, and he is the main antagonist in multiple Magic the Gathering sagas. He goes by several names. His servants know him as the Ineffable, and in Dominarian mythology, he's referred to as the Lord of the Wastes. Way back during the time of the Fulani Empire, Yawgmoth was a medical genius. However, he was banished because of his controversial solutions to medical ailments. The planeswalker Diafed led him to the artificial plane of Phyrexia, and Yawgmoth decided to use this mechanical plane for his own gain. Yawgmoth was using his medical genius to find a cure for the disease called Thysis, and he brought Thysis-inflicted Thran with him to this new plane. He saved these diseased humans by replacing their weak mortality with artifice, a process referred to as phyresis. Yawgmoth and these cured Thran were viewed as traitors by the Fulani Empire. Before Yawgmoth's arrival, Phyrexia looked very similar to Mirrodin. Everything that Phyrexia became was created by Yawgmoth. He wasn't only the king of the plane, he was essentially the creator. Yawgmoth became the god of Phyrexia. Yawgmoth always desired to return to his home plane of Dominaria and turn its inhabitants into perfect beings that he would rule over. Urza returned to Dominaria and revisited the Caves of Koios. The Mightstone and the Weakstone were now embedded in his head as his eyes, and Urza now had new planeswalker abilities that gave him the power to read the ancient glyphs that were written where Urza and Mishra had initially found the Mightstone and Weakstone. Urza learned that the Fulani Empire was eradicated by the Phyrexians, and only the Mightstone and the Weakstone were able to seal the Phyrexians away from Dominaria. This new knowledge only increased Urza's desire for vengeance, and the only thing he could think about was the destruction of Phyrexia, no matter what the cost. 50 more years went by, and Urza continued with his obsession. On a distant plane, he found some Phyrexian workers who were about to destroy what he thought was a human girl. Urza destroyed the Phyrexians and freed the girl. The girl told Urza that she used to be a Phyrexian, but for a while Urza didn't believe her. She looked like a normal human girl. The girl told Urza, Yawgmoth spent eons wrapping Phyrexians in human skin. They are the sleeper agents, and they are everywhere. This girl, or Phyrexian, whatever you want to call her, she went by the name of Xantcha. Xantcha became Urza's assistant. Xantcha told Urza important information about Phyrexia, including instructions on how to find the remains of a portal that allowed Phyrexians to enter other worlds. Urza believed that the Phyrexian workers would return, so he built a little cottage for Xantcha and they waited. In the meantime, Urza attempted to create a dragon engine that could combat the Phyrexians. At this point, Urza was feeling rather lonely. The last friend he had was Thanos, and he had died 250 years ago. The flavor text on Rogue Kavu displays Urza's feelings of loneliness. Urza said, "I know how this one feels. It's not like the others of its kind, and it has been shunned for its differences." So, when 200 years went by and Xantcha was still alive, Urza was very pleased by this. It appeared as if Xantcha was immortal just like him. Urza was correct that the Phyrexian workers would eventually return, and when they did, Urza easily destroyed them. Urza was then able to enter their portal, and finally, after years and years of searching, Urza found the plane of Phyrexia. And that is where I'm going to leave off with Urza's story. So if you'd like to hear more, I carry on the story in part 2.